Today we are talking about estimating with percents. So the first one says, what are the equivalent fraction and decimal for 44 1/4%? Okay, so there's a lot of things going on here. First of all, 44 1/4 is a percent. I don't really like that it's written with a fraction, so I think that I would change that to a decimal. And I'm just going to do 1 divided by 4. If you already know that that's 0.25, that's totally fine. But if you don't know, then you can do it in your calculator and say that's 0.25. So this is 44.25%. And we want to rewrite that as a decimal, and we want to rewrite that as a fraction. So I'm going to do a decimal first. If I want to change a percent to a decimal, I am going to move it 2 times to the left. So I'm going to take my decimal place and I'm going to move it once, twice. My new decimal will be here in the front. And then I'm going to write the rest of my numbers. 44, so it's point, and you can put a 0 in the front, 0.4425. You don't have to put the 0 in front, but this is what it would be as a decimal. And now we're going to write that as a fraction. Now what I like to do is I like to do this in Desmos, but I'll show you the other way as well. You count how many spaces you have after the decimal. In this case, there are 4. So when I make this into a fraction, I have to put it over 1 with 4 zeros. Now, if this was just 0.4, since it's 1 decimal place, you would do 4 over 1 with 1 0, 10. If it was 0.44, that's 2 decimal places, so you would do 44 over 100 because you'd have 2 zeros. So the zeros represent how many decimal places you have. And in this case, since we have 1, 2, 3, 4 after the decimal, we need to make sure we have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. And now Desmos will reduce that for you because that is a big number, right? So 4425 divided by 4 zeros, so 10,000. And it gives you that decimal. So we know we've written our fraction correctly because it equals the decimal, but we want it as a reduced fraction. So we're going to hit this blue fraction button, and that reduces to 177 over 400. And you always want to make sure that you do reduce those fractions. So use your Desmos to reduce it for you. What are the equivalent fraction and decimal for 30%? Okay, so first I'm going to change my percent to a decimal. When I have a percent and I want to change it to a decimal, I have to move it 2 times. Now we don't see the decimal here. Like in the last problem, we already had the decimal was right there. If you don't see the decimal, it's understood to be at the end. So I'm going to put it there and then I'm going to move it 2 times. So it's going to be 0.3. Now you can leave it as 0.30 or you can leave off the 0 and just leave it as 0.3. So that is as a decimal. And then if we want to write it as a fraction, there's 2 ways you could write this. Since I left 2 decimal places, I'm going to go ahead and write 30 over 100. I'm going to make sure I have those 2 zeros. Now, if you had dropped that 0 and you just had 0.3, then you would write 3 over 10. You would just want the 1 0. But I'll show you that if you do 30 over 100 to begin with, it will reduce to the same thing. So if we type in 30 divided by 100, and then we change that back to the most reduced fraction, it is 3/10. All right, estimate 78% of 50. Now the word of in math is really important. The word of tells us to multiply. So whenever we see the word of in math, we're going to multiply. So what this really tells us is we want to do 78% times 50. Now I don't multiply with percents. I change my percents to decimals and then I multiply. So to change this to a decimal, we would move it twice. So we would do 0.78 times 50. And since we're estimating, you could round that to 0.8 times 50. But honestly, I'm so used to using my calculator that I would probably just type it in exactly how it is. 0.78 times 50, and that is 39. So when I saw this, I knew that of meant multiply. I changed my percent to a decimal, and then I multiplied them. You go out to eat with your family, and you agree to leave the tip. What is 18% tip on a $58 bill? So we're going to take our total, which is $58, and we're going to multiply that by the percent. So I'm going to set this up originally like the last one was. I'm going to do 58 times 18%. But again, I don't multiply by percents. There's not a percent button in our calculators. So we're going to move that decimal twice to change that into a decimal. 0.18. So I change my percent to a decimal, and then I'm going to multiply. Now, when you write 58.00, you don't have to actually put the zeros in your calculator. You could just do 58 times 0.18, or you could put the zeros in there if you're more comfortable doing that. I'm just going to put 58 times 0.18, and that tells me that the tip would be $10.44. And so that would be the tip amount. If you needed to find the tip and then find the total, then you would go back and you would add in the $58 to that tip amount to get the total. In a survey of 550 people, 58% liked tasty pizza. Estimate how many people like tasty pizza. Okay, so we have 550 total people, and of those, 58% like it. And we use, it doesn't say the word of, but of the 550, 58 liked it. So we are actually multiplying. Again, I'm not going to multiply by the percent. I'm going to convert that to a decimal. So I'm going to do 550 times 0.58. And we shouldn't really use the X now that we're in algebra, because that kind of makes it doesn't look like a multiply symbol. It looks like an X to me. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to write this with parentheses. I don't really want to use a dot either, because a dot might look like the decimal. So parentheses is usually the best way to write it. So now I'm going to do 500 and, what just happened? 550 times, and I already forgot what it was, 0.58. Oops. So that is 319. So of the 550 people, 319 of them like the pizza. And that's it. Good luck on your quick check.